Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the sanctuary. For those of you that are new, my name is Chris, and today we're talking about zombies with Josh Davidson. Josh, welcome back to the channel. Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Oh man, thank you for having me again. I appreciate it. The invite as well as just you're very welcoming. So I appreciate you. My name's Josh Davidson. I am from California. I'm a dude, bro. That's why I sound like this. I love the Lord. I've been in church my entire life, but learned as an adult how to take it seriously. And now I am a very adamant student of the Scripture and a lover of theology and all things deep. But I have a particular soft spot for storytelling, for reading, for books, and especially for the patterns that emerge when you read across many different stories. I love fiction, I love symbolism, and I love the way that the scripture molds those things in and out and weaves them through the various themes that emerge when you read the whole of scripture, because it is many books as well. So that's kind of my main emphasis with what I do. I'm one of the co-founders of the Faith Unaltered channel on YouTube, and I host a segment on that channel called Cosmic Corner, where that's what I talk about pretty much all the time is the image of God, narrative patterns, and Christian symbolism, and how it is we can best serve the Lord. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from, man.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Yeah, so today we're talking about zombies. So, yeah, where to where to even start? So, like zombies are deeply embedded in North American pop culture. Like we have zombie movies, we have zombie video games, we have zombie TV shows, and then the zombie video games get their own zombie TV shows.
Yeah.
So
Or
like
comic
it's
book.
just yeah, then there's the comic books, everything. And pretty
Yeah.
much any form of literature of any kind, you're going to find zombies somewhere if you look long enough. And so,
Yeah.
like, I think maybe the first question, Josh, is why is our culture so obsessed with zombies?
Um, well, it's a pretty dense question, I would say. To unpack it a little bit, I think one of the things that's necessary is really to try to articulate why we are drawn to tell ourselves about things that are frightening, and why we have a tendency to identify something like a zombie, right?
Mhm.
One of the things that is just part of our humanness is our tendency to look at things that are in front of us and give them value and give them let's say a moral stance of some kind, right? You can see something that's good, something that's evil. In the tendency, in the plainest sense of our bare bones existence living on the ground floor of our real experiences, if you see something that you think is good, the basic way you can think about it, how you know that you think that it's good without telling somebody or giving some sort of like, I'm going to make an assessment. Like what you do when something is good to you is you emulate it, you imitate it, you follow it, you try to recreate it for yourself so that you can have that same thing. That's what it really means to think personally, not necessarily morally, but personally, that something is good for me, right? Is that I
Mhm.
want it. I want to experience it. I want to recreate it. I want to become it, right? A zombie is something that we can firmly identify as not in that category. And yet, when we look at it, we can deeply identify why it is that in real life, when we don't meet a biological category of something called zombie, where there's just a rotting person walking around, the closest thing that I think we have is like leprosy, probably. But that's not exactly a zombie. That's more of like a medical condition of somebody that's terminal, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think the reason why we're afraid of zombies, and this is something that if I can shameless plug, I have content on this for Cosmic Corner. This is the way that I kind of I'll paraphrase because I don't want to I don't have it written down or anything, but the way that I've come to kind of understand the what a zombie as such is, not in any one particular story, but when you zoom all the way out and you see their commonalities as the pattern they are across stories, what it really comes to is the zombie is sort of like the mirror congruity, the opposite, the yin to the yang of what a ghost is, right? A ghost is
Mm,
a spirit that doesn't have a habitable vessel. It doesn't have a body, right?
mhm,
And that's how the ancient world would have viewed the horror of death, is your body remains and your spirit is just not inhabiting what it should. It can't be itself because it doesn't have the body. And in the modern world, we've flipped everything inside out. We've rejected that premise, and we're modern folks now. We have air conditioning and seatbelts, so we know there's no souls and spirits. We're materialists now, right? And so when we rejected that premise and we deleted the ghost out of the machine, what you have left is just the bare bones of the body itself. And that's why I think the zombie emerges as the perfect modern monster. It's the perfect materialist monster because all it is a body devoid of spirit or soul. So it's the opposite of a ghost. It's a body without personhood. It's not a personhood without a body. And that makes it terrifying because it has all the same possibility and potential that the human body has without any of the guiding principles that would cause it to be human. What I mean by that is when you see a human and you have that empathic identifier, right? You could, you're human, I'm human. Even if we don't speak the same language, there's something that bridges that gap. A zombie lacks that something that bridges the gap, right? All it has in place of that is just the base hungers, right? A ghost is someone trying to finish a thesis. To your friends and neighbors, yes, you're just kind of sauntering about. But yeah, I think that when people meet one another, there's something that you kind of latch onto, that you know that this is something that you identify with, right? And to some degree, we do this also with animals, right? Like when you meet a happy dog, it's a spirited type animal, right? You meet a golden retriever and you can identify with its urges and its movement and its playfulness and everything else, right? Um, but if you took the spirited bit out of a human and all you had left was plain unanswerable desire, nothing articulate, nothing rational, nothing consciousness, just the drive of desire, right? That's kind of what a zombie is. It's basically if you took the driving force of what inspires hedonism and you took the experience of pleasure out and it was just the desire itself, and it's an unsatiable and unanswerable desire. That's what zombies are, and we fear them because we know that that's actually part of who and what we are, is something that has desire, and if it becomes
mhm.
unbridled will consume everything. We know that about ours. Well, we should know about that about ourselves. People that have the wisdom to know themselves often can see that tendency in themselves to be consumptive, to want more. It's greed, right? It's the desire not for more than what I have, just more than what you have, right? That's
Mhm.
pride. Pride
Yeah.
just wants more than what the next guy has. It's never content. There's no bottom to it, right? And so it's a terrifying thing, I think, mostly because it lacks that human bit. It has the form, but none of the function that a human person would, right? And so it plays that role, I think, of the modern atheistic era that we live in, and it's showing itself as that mirror of what we never wanted to see. The same way that the ancient world felt itself and the universe was haunted. It was a haunted place, right? You reject the haunting, and all you have left is the terror of the mechanism, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking of when we think of this concept of the zombie, um, and I don't know, I would like your take on this, Josh. Like, whether it's done on purpose, do you think a zombie is like the human's imagination of maybe what it might look like to be human if we weren't made in the image of God?
Yes. No, I think that's why I would say it's the materialist monster, is because
Mm,
it does exactly that. It offers you nothing more than the unhaunted universe. And so
Mhm.
if you and this is the thing that I disdain so deeply about modern political landscapes is this insistence that the reaction that we need to people who misunderstand the body is to insist back to them that you are your body.
Mm. Mhm.
And that's the end of the insistence. You are your body. And your body
Mhm.
happens to be a system of cause and effect, right? And so in the modern, let's say, materialistic era that we are still inhabiting, people have a tendency of looking at the universe as a place of strictly cause and effect. And we think that's reasonable. The problem is reason itself is not a mechanism of cause and effect. We've already stepped outside the system to create the system, right? And so
Mhm.
oftentimes we forget, well, even when we're all our advanced sciences and things, the way that we figured out the world by looking at it like a mechanism, we forget we ourselves are part of it. And when that revelation happens, that's when it becomes terrifying. That's when you include yourself as the unhaunted thing and you're just a body. That means, of course, that if you're not made in the image of God, you don't have a soul, you don't have a spirit, you don't outlive your body. You're of no more consequence than a goldfish, really.
Right.
That
Mhm.
meaninglessness, that nihilism piece that comes along with it is enough to fuel the the fear alone that there's nothing after, right? But let's say you play just for a minute with the idea that there is something after, but not for you. It's only for the body because that's all you are, see? Right? And so if you eliminate the image of God, you eliminate the soul and the spirit. All you have left is the physical vessel, right? And so there
Mhm.
is nothing behind it. There's nothing behind the face. There is no you that I'm talking to. There's just the body, right? And if
Right.
there's no you that I'm talking to and there's nothing inside there, right? Then there's nothing to appeal to. There's nothing to answer to. If you hurt me, you disdain me, you take from me, you pillage me. You can take it into a sexual metaphor. There's a molestation kind of situation coming out of it, right? Where it's like this taking of the sacred by a denial of the sacred, right? And that's how a zombie becomes as terrifying as it is because it cannot treat you as sacred. They can't. There's nothing that a zombie can do to recognize the sacredness of the other because it doesn't have that. It lacks that. And what it wants from you is what it lacks, that conscious life. So that's what it takes from you. That's its desire. That's the unanswerable desire, right? And so the scary thing actually I think is the fact that it's not one zombie that's really scary in most of the shows. It's actually the horde. It's the grouping, right? It's the way that people come together. When you see people come together, you see great strength in their numbers. Take the humanity away and you have the strength and you have the horror. One of the most terrifying parts about zombie shows or movies is the gratuitous scene where somebody gets surrounded and they get eaten limb from limb while they're still conscious and alive,
Mhm.
right? And while they're screaming out in pain, these mindless and soulless monsters who look just like them, who intuitively you should be able to see that they should have some empathic trait to appeal to, that they would be stoppable or at least recognize the evil. There's no evil in a zombie. It has nothing to correspond to evil or good. It's just the drive and the desire, right? And so when that group of drive and desire, driven by something beyond themselves, is handed over and you become consumed by it, what it's doing is denying your humanity, right? It's taking of you. And so that it's violating and it is terrifying, not just viscerally to see something ripped apart and know
Mhm.
that there's pain in there. It's also that when you see a zombie and it's half rotted and its legs broken or its face is bitten off or something, you feel pity in some real sense because the thing should have pain, but it doesn't. And it's
Mhm.
not stopped by that. It's not phased by that. Right. And so there's a lot about it that really, like, it really gives you something to think about how that terror kind of lands for you in a very real sense. If you think about how it would be if you were conscious as a zombie, if you were watching the film from the zombie's eyes, but you couldn't do anything to stop it. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the only things that could amplify the terror of a zombie is if you were trapped inside and the zombie was enacting that, you were embodied that way, but had no conscious control or decision over what was happening. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that's kind of what makes it a really terrifying thing, is there's just nothing there.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe a really good thing for us to kind of touch on then is when we talk about evil, because like in kind of like in North American culture, when we talk about evil, w- we kind of talk about it in like the philosophical sense of, like good versus evil. It's almost like a power or a force, in many ways. But like anybody that would do some serious research into the Bible, when it speaks about evil, it speaks about a couple different things. Sometimes when it talks about evil, it is talking about this, like the devil is an evil being and is based on causing pain and destruction. But another form of evil, when evil is talked about in the Bible, specifically the Old Testament, the idea of pain and destruction is evil. Like that is causing evil. And that can be done without necessarily malicious intent, but it's just like
Hmm.
like if a tornado goes through and a bunch of people get killed, that's evil in the sense that it caused a bunch of pain and destruction. And
Right.
so maybe let's just hit on this. What type of evil is a zombie?
Um, well, to become a zombie, I would say, would be to be consumed by that kind of calamity sort of evil that you're describing. Is if evil befell someone, in the old-timey sense of using that word in that way, when someone says evil befell someone versus evil was committed against someone as a trespass, right? Or and some sort of iniquity, right? There's a lot of different words that we can use to kind of stand in for it, but evil as an act, something that is volitional and done toward others, is something that is evil in a moral sense, right? But then the evil that you're describing is kind of amoral, where it's like you don't blame a hurricane the way you do a Nazi with the Holocaust, right?
Right.
You blame
Yeah.
the Nazi, you don't blame the clouds, because
Hmm.
blameworthiness is attached to volition, right? And so evil as such in that sense requires volition. It requires that ability to respond in kind. It has something attached to it that's more than just the plain physical nature of the thing. And so I don't think that zombies are necessarily capable, at least the let's say the more traditional type zombies that are just the dead body I was talking about, because we do have things like the what was that movie called, I Am Legend, that had zombies that
Oh yeah.
seemed like they were conscious, right? They played with that very deeply, with the idea that they still had feelings and they were empathic, they had in-group preference, they had all kinds of things that made them not a regular zombie, right? And
Hmm.
so in that sense, those kind of things I think can be considered an evil in both senses. But for the most part, in the most generic sense, I think that it's probably better to think about the zombie or the horde as something that's more akin to an earthquake or a hurricane than it is akin to a murderer, right?
Hmm.
Um, but uh, from the inside, emotionally, when you see what's happening in a zombie film, you don't have much distance between what you're witnessing and the idea of murder, right? So there isn't actually much distance and dissonance between watching a horde of zombies rip somebody apart and Jeffrey Dahmer, let's say, right?
Hmm.
Like there really isn't that much difference between the two, except the volition. That's really the only distinguishing factor. And so I think that that's probably what, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's probably the best, like, pointed answer to what you're asking.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of like, I guess, like part of the, I mean, you don't even really have good language to describe this, but I think part of what makes the zombie so mysterious is normally like with a vampire. you can just call a vampire evil, right? The vampire is the villain and the kind of the Satan figure. And so we don't have a lot of problem identifying evil with like Dracula or something.
Hmm.
But when it comes to the zombie, like the zombies, they're kind of victims themselves, right? Because like they have this hunger they can't satisfy. They have these urges they can't satisfy, and and you look in their eyes, and sometimes the way they're depicted like they're in pain all the time. And so
Yeah.
it's almost like it's not just that the zombie is causing evil through its like lusts for food and that sort of thing. It's need to consume, but it's also a victim of itself because it's just suffering itself as it's causing suffering.
Right. Exactly. I think that probably the closest thing that I would say, like theologically or biblically, would be the way that, let's say, unclean spirits seem to operate in the scripture, right?
Mm.
Is
Mhm.
people here on the ground floor operate under the influence of spirits, right? And let's say if
Mhm.
they outsourced their volition and they began to act in accordance with some guidance that wasn't themselves, right? On an individual level, the closest thing that I can see to this is something like addiction, right? Where the
Mhm.
person is actually back to something that's driving them and they are in suffering, they are in conflict, they are a victim, but sometimes a self induced victim. And so it makes it difficult to find where pity would lie and where condemnation would lie because there
Mhm.
is that gray area, right? And even St. Paul goes out of his way to say, our enemy isn't the flesh and blood. It's not the person. It's not the imager in front of you. It's the spiritual guidance that they're following, that they're under the thumb of something that is beyond them, right? Like you had said, they've lost control and become victim to something. They might have walked into the trap, but they're still victim to something, right? And that's why we're to have mercy rather than judgment toward those people. You judge the fruit, but you want to redeem the person, right? And so what you try to do is combat darkness without combating the person necessarily. Sometimes there's a lot of overlap in that because thought is messy and people don't know how to draw separations between themselves and their influences, especially if they're not conscious of how all that works out, right? And so
Mhm.
there's a little bit of gray area in that also, but then you can see how let's say the movement or the guidance of dark spirits, to lack of better word, demons, right?
Mhm.
Demons actively want to engage with using human beings to form for themselves a body of action. They want to be able to do things here in the material world, but they themselves lack material vessel. So they want to commandeer you, let's say. How do they do that? Well, they can't just kill you and take your body and make it a meat puppet. That would be really convenient. Instead, what they do is leave you in there. So you're guilty, right? But then
Mhm.
you begin to participate in the will of a spirit and do its will. And by doing its will, you offer it body, right? And so that is in fact like the congruity. The dark spirit would be something more like the vampire because it's the head that consumes the body, right? And then the body that's offered to it would be something more like the zombie mob because it's through a distributed kind of transpersonal agency that these spirits operate across other people and get them to perform whatever tasks that they want. We see this happen consistently in political spheres. It's one of the easiest ways to identify this is watching people do this. But if we want a scriptural example, right, we can look at something like the way that the people were going to stone the woman who was caught in adultery, right? They were all together in condemnation, in unison, one voice, ready to drop the hammer on this woman. And Christ comes along and doesn't invalidate their condemnation of what she did. He validates her guilt and says instead, the one of you that is not like her can act first. But guess what? Once stone is thrown, man, it's easy to throw stones. But you
Mhm.
just need the first one. You need patient zero, and then the outbreak happens really easy. You see what I mean? Like it distributes itself so seamlessly. But all you need is that first event. which is patient zero. Usually in a zombie movie, of patient zero, the first one, and then the infection spreads because nobody's ready to fight it. They have no idea no point of reference. They have no
Mhm.
idea what they're looking for, no idea how to combat it, right? And then the search after that spreads, the search then is no longer how do we like kill the zombie. It's like we're outnumbered. How do we cure the thing so we ourselves don't succumb to it, right? And
Right.
so in the opposite end of that, the whole world is overrun with darkness. Here we are on enemy occupied territory as those who have been reclaimed. We have a cure. You see what I mean? So it's like all of those
Mhm.
pieces are there. This is very gospel oriented when you start to look at it that way. But all of the pieces are there. But then we have to be reminded, and I'm glad that Paul put this in his writing, that our enemy is not flesh and bone. It's not the people in front of us. It's
Mhm.
not the people. It's not the flesh and blood, right?
Yeah.
It's actually the thing that's operative behind them, right? And so in that way, it's not congruous to the whole zombie thing because it actually acknowledges something behind. You know what I mean? Um, and so I think that the zombie is like looking at the spiritual darkness present in the world, but not acknowledging dark spirits that are there behind the scenes. And so it'd be like the nihilist looking at the world and recognizing evil, but having no framework for acknowledging or combating it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about why zombies freak us out so much. But as an illustration, I'm gonna play a clip. Um, so there's no blood or anything like that in this clip. But it's not for kids. It's somebody being chased by zombies, and so if there's anybody with kids, don't let the kids watch this section. But for the basis of our conversation, I think this really sums up what a zombie is and kind of like our worst nightmare when it comes to like if the zombies showed up. So in this scene, I'm just gonna bring it up here. Abby has just basically fallen down an ice hill or a snow hill, and she stands up and she is basically in a field of frozen zombies. And so we'll just pick it up here. and it's got to go from bad to worse because it's a zombie show. All right, Josh. Why
Well, I
do
would say,
zombies freak us out so much? Like I'm getting anxiety just watching this, and I know it's made up.
well, I would say the most striking thing about this, that entire scene just now, was the contrast between the immediate silence that we broke out with in the beginning and throughout that entire scene, all the way until the gunshot. The gunshot and the ringing was the closest thing to music that you could hear in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Silence and the contrast between silence and the guttural non-utterances, I think, creates that anxiety first and foremost. We're very sensory creatures,
Mm-hmm.
right? God made us to be sensory and emotive, and our senses and our emotions are in like undividable. They're the same in a lot of cases. And so what you hear, what you see, what you smell, they're all integral to how you feel towards something, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so the sounds that you're hearing, the and the, let's say the visual, the sheer speed, the numbers, the overwhelmedness of the whole thing. The one zombie at the end that got through the gate is only frightening insofar as it's in contact with you.
Mm-hmm.
If it's far enough away from you, there's deterrent, there's the stopping, you could kill the thing, you could trap the thing, you could disable it somehow, whatever, right? But when there's that many of them, this is where it becomes something like, let's say, on a psychological level rather than just a symbolic one. Psychologically, we can identify with this much more closely if I give you an illustration. Let's say in your life, you know that there are things that are problems that you have that you can confront. You know you can confront them. You have laundry to do. There's a basket over there. There's a washer and a dryer in your house. You can confront that problem, right? Then you can, in compound with that, let's say there's a combination explosion that happens when you introduce every level of difficulty that your life actually throws at you. And anxiety is paralyzing because all it does is show you exactly what you just saw. It gives you the contrast of silence. There's no harmonious pattern in the backdrop. You have
Mm-hmm.
silence. And the contrast that's there is the screaming plethora of problem. And that's what your anxiety shows you, which is why a scene like that does the same thing. Visually and auditorily, it's representing the same thing that your anxiety does at 11 p.m. when you can't sleep and your brain is telling you everything that you ever said that was dumb, every word you ever got wrong, the date you blew with so and so, and the time you missed out on that one opportunity, and all the things you did wrong today, and how much money you owe to the government, and how much you have on your taxes, and what you're going to do for your job, and how am I going to feed my family, and blah, 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 blah. Every level of resolution of terror. If you take each level of resolution and broke them down, you could have something vaguely manageable. But if you tried to look that whole structure in the face simultaneously, you have an avalanche, just like what she saw. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's one of the things viscerally why it's terrifying, is the sheer overwhelmedness of it. You would get the same feeling looking at a tsunami.
Right.
There's hardly a
Right.
difference. Your emotions, there's hardly a difference between that and a tsunami, or a pack of lions, or a school of piranha, or an avalanche, or the boulder in Indiana Jones, let's say, is an early nascent version of this also. Like, you have that, it's not going to stop. It's way bigger than you. There's nothing you can do but hopefully get out of the way or buy. And that's kind of what you're left with, right? And so there's lots of faces that feeling could have, but when they give it to you in this sense, what you're getting is a very visceral, body oriented fear rather than a psychological one first, right? But they make it psychological by that contrast of no music, silence. They remove the harmonious patterns. They don't even give you dissonant patterns. They just give you the contrast between the silence of the backdrop and the crunching of her feet, the additional crunching of hundreds of feet, and the snarling of some animalistic mob, right? And so
Mhm.
let's say at some point when there's enough people in a crowd, the same sound emerges. If they're all hollering their nonsense at the same time, the overwhelming just barking that comes out of a crowd, and there's nothing articulate anymore. It's lost on you. That is the same thing. Witch hunting, let's say. It's very
Mm.
similar, right? And so once the mob has its eyes on you, this is why I think when the ancient world looked at things like magic, let's say the evil eye or something like that, they weren't all that crazy, really. Because let's say there was somebody in your town who had the ability to get your friends and neighbors to see you as evil,
Mm.
gave them the lenses and the eyes to see you as evil. You know what amounts to that? You know what causes that? It's witchcraft. It's called
Mhm.
gossip. Gossip does that, right? And so it can create a mob, it can create a horde, right? It can create those kind of things very down home, right here on the ground floor. We do have experiences very much like this, right?
Actually, yeah, like, that's sorry, Josh, I have to pause you just for a sec
Oh, you're
because
okay.
you tend to you'll say something and you'll keep going, and I'm just like, "Whoa, he just ruined my whole universe." Okay,
Feel
so
free to interrupt at any point. Yes. Yeah.
what you said about witchcraft and gossip, you are right. That's what gossip does. Gossip creates a horde of people that want to hate you, that want to bring your life down, want to destroy you. That's a really interesting connection that you made.
And I think that, and I've said this before. I've got actually knocked people got upset with me when I've said explicitly that gossip is a kind of witchcraft.
Mm,
It's parallel. Even if you reject the idea of supernatural magic, the closest
mhm,
thing I think we have is things like music, gossip, right? Like those are the things that really on a fundamental subconscious underneath the tide of your conscious, which means it takes your volition away in some real sense. That's what subconscious influence does, right? And so, in some sense, we do have an experience that's analogous to being the zombie because then you become this thoughtless action. You know, when we see our kids and we ask them the dumb question, "What were you thinking?" And they go, the answer is they weren't. They were acting and thought wasn't there. Reaction was. There was impulse and then there was action. There wasn't thought in between. That's when we call them mindless. And we tell our kids not to be mindless zombies, wooden headed puppets like
mhm,
Pinocchio. I want you to be a real boy, kid. I want you to be a real boy. I don't want these things to be taken from you. Peer pressure should be a myth. You should be powerful enough that peer pressure becomes a myth, right? That's very, very difficult to achieve with your children. Their ability to make right decisions and things are going to be deeply influenced by that mob mind and the sweeping power of that influence. And they have to be some seriously bold suckers to stand up to that and be like,
mhm.
no, I'm ready to be weird, outcast, exile, no one, in danger from all of you. I'm not going along with that. That's very difficult. It's very
Oh, yeah.
costly.
Mhm. Very yeah, very costly. We're well, I mean, like right now, people are currently they've done studies and they are doing studies on things like why are young people currently like I'm thinking like Gen Z and even coming up Gen Alpha, but like Gen Z, they have experienced in a generation they've experienced way more suicide than any generation has before. And in the West, what it's looking like is social media is having a huge has a huge part to play in this because like Josh, I assume we're close to the same age. But like when I was 13, the best you had was YouTube, but there was no social media yet. And so if I said something or did something foolish, it pretty much did not leave my town. But now if somebody says something foolish online, it's broadcasted to everyone, sometimes people in other countries. And I think and I think of, like the modern teenagers, one text message can ruin their life.
Mhm.
And so, but no, yeah, no, I but that does take us into this, into this witchcraft idea that for some people they're just sending a text message, but for other people they're having their lives ruined. And because they're young, they don't have the maturity to know that life goes on beyond high school. And what you think is life altering and life crushing right now is going to seem like a really small thing in 5 years. And so all
Yeah,
of that kinda gets thrown into the pot.
yeah. There is a it kind of deviates from our topic, but there is a resolution problem. Like this, how close you should look at the thing. It's kind of like the scale of how many problems you have. You try to look at the whole of it. It's too much.
Mhm,
You can look at any individual level, even if there's still a thousand things you can't get to, but there's one of them you can. That's powerful. But that immobility comes from looking at the problem at the wrong level of resolution. And so in our modern world, often what we're doing is living in an abstracted world where the rest of the world, this huge place that we actually have no control over and no business touching, because it's not the part of the world that God gave us permission to touch, right? We're concerned with that. And somehow we can't any longer be concerned with the tiny little world we actually occupy. And when that tiny little world we actually occupy gets compromised, what else do you have to look at? Right. And so when the big world that's out there that you have nothing to do with and have no, it's a tide that you can't control. When that world is the same as your tiny little world, and they're both just the overwhelming tide of something you can't deal with, then what do you have but retreat? You run away. You know what I mean? Like, what are
mhm,
you supposed to do? You just like valiantly stand there and get hit by the tide. That's what you should do. Who's going to do that though? Really?
mhm,
Who's going to do that? Serious? Nobody's going to do that unless
yeah,
you know, like you said, there's something on the other side of the wave. You just don't know. But if you stand still, you don't get moved. The wave goes past, just like time always does. And when you're on the other side of that tide, you can turn back and see what it's done. Maybe you could have done something to stop some of the damage, but at least now you're on the other side and you can now do something to repair damage, to overcome, to rebuild, to deter the next thing that might come down the pipes. That's the learning process. You know what I mean? Like that's the process of maturity. It's the same thing you do to your conscience. What do you know? You're growing up. Your conscience is not infallible. It doesn't know anything more than you do. Really. It doesn't. And it has to learn. You're wrong. All the time you're wrong. But you mean well, don't you? But you're wrong. Like you
mhm,
have to be corrected. You need those tides to come. And it's those things. This is when evil befalls you versus the evil that you do. Sometimes when evil befalls you, it is the best thing that could happen to and for you because it refines out of you the naivety and the ignorance and the willful ignorance a lot of the time and the tendency to live habitually rather than willfully, right? We
mhm,
need disturbances. We need those divine interruptions. Some of them are blessed interruptions. Children are a great example of this. When are you ever ready to be a father, a mother? Hogwash, ready is a myth. I have two children. One of them is 11. I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. I didn't even have a dad. I don't know how to be a dad. I'm told that I'm a great dad.
mhm.
You know what? You'd show up with things that you needed when you were that age, when you were that person. Adults, we forget we were ever kids. We get swept away by those tides and we just forget all of that, and children have no point of reference. And so they get swept away in the overwhelming problem. We have the same problems. So it doesn't matter if you're a child or if you're an adult. Sometimes you're flirting with that darkness in the wrong way. And I think that's what a generation who doesn't see past the tide because they have no point of reference, right? And they're playing this kind of Peter Pan game. They can see that the only adults are like Captain Hook, and who the hell wants to be like him? I want no part of it. So I'm not growing up. Can't make me be a boy forever. And then you stay potential, but then you become nothing.
Yeah, growing up is when you realize, when you rewatch some of those old Disney movies you watched as a kid, and you look at Aladdin, you look at Ariel, and you're like, I identify with your father, like 100%. You have no business talking to that strange man that you don't know at 16, And like
Exactly.
when that I remember watching that scene when Poseidon comes in and he finds that Ariel has all of these trinkets of humanity that she's collected, and to teach her a lesson, he takes his trident and he destroys everything. And watching it as an adult, I'm like, yeah, you should do more. Like, she's a horrible child and she's endangering herself. But I think that's just part of growing up is looking at these and you and you realize Aladdin is a horrible person.
Yeah, Aladdin was not a shining example of virtue and valor. He wasn't. He
Not at
wasn't a
all, no.
hero. He was a very strange jester-like anti-hero character.
Yeah.
But in the 90s, we were being conditioned to root for the underdog.
For sure. Yeah.
That was the storytelling that we were pitched over and over and over, is to root for the underdog. It's no longer the jock, it's the nerd. It's the nobody. It's the person who's handicapped. It's the person who's left behind. It's the newcomer, right? Like, all of those people are the people you're taught to root for now. Why? Because there was a lack before. There was a lack, but then you have this pendulum swing, and now we worship the edge of the world, and anything that's difficult is now more virtuous somehow. And so people that
Right.
have hard lives are saints somehow, right? Just by definition of being difficult, their lives are somehow saintly and we should listen to them. It's like, yeah, maybe, but probably not really. Like, let's be sensible about it. Like, being the underdog doesn't make you virtuous, right? Like it's not a
Yeah.
default position that just because you're the underdog, you're the virtuous one. Scar
Right.
was the underdog. Hello? When he
Absolutely.
got
Yeah,
power,
for
it went
sure.
very wrong. And he
Mhm.
tried it. He tried everything that we're being pitched now. Like, well, we won't have to work. We'll outsource everything. We'll all just have what we want as much as we want. And then everything falls apart.
Yep.
He's a terrible leader. And he started as the underdog. You don't root for that guy unless he is virtuous.
Right.
But you need
Mhm.
the eyes to see. And so you don't overlook the underdog. But you don't just like mindlessly, zombie like,
Mhm.
root for the guy. That it's just like, you don't need that, right? And so it's more of the mob thing, right? It's like people sweeping in and that group influence really having so much grasp, because it has so much grasp. And I'm thankful that when I was a kid, I was so stubbornly rebellious, because it made peer pressure laughable to me. I used to do things on purpose to make everyone else uncomfortable, just because I thought peer pressure was so funny. Like, to see
Mhm.
other people doing what other people did just because other people did it. Like, there's all kinds of things I did. Now that I'm an adult, I see that most of them were uncharitable. But before trolling was cool, I was basically trolling people. I thought it was funny to make other people uncomfortable because it made me that outlier. It made me that weirdo, because I was conditioned to root for that guy. I wanted to be that guy.
Right.
Right. And so, but I'm
Yeah.
funny and I'm easy to talk to and I'm likable or whatever. So you get the contrast between those two things and you get a real interesting engagement. But there's not everybody who's the underdog is a charismatic weirdo who's funny. Right. Like, not everybody's aiming for that. It's very difficult. Like I said, it's very difficult to be the outlier. Like, it's
Mhm.
not a comfortable place. It can be wildly entertaining, but it's not comfortable. And so most people, because they want comfortability, they want steadiness, they want consistency, they want order, they want their expectation met. right? And so they don't want that. They go along with the grip of the tide. Much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, as you were talking, you'd briefly mentioned like this idea that uh, you briefly mentioned this idea that comfort does not necessarily equal character. You kind of hinted at that, and that this idea of the wave, as the wave comes in, like if you stand, the wave will actually go around you, and you can stay stable if you have stable footing. But if you are afraid of the wave, it's going to push you where, and it's going to take you wherever it wants to take you. And like that kind of, I guess it kind of brings me to this idea that in when it comes to suffering in our culture doesn't like suffering. It doesn't like to talk about suffering. We like to, in fact, a
Mhm.
lot of times we just like to pretend like it doesn't exist. Like we don't look at the addict on the street when we walk past. We try to forget about the fact that that homeless guy is probably in a lot of pain himself, and we try not to focus on it. And even like in the at least in the evangelical Christian world, we sometimes we have this belief that we try to preach, is that God wants you to be comfortable all the time. And we completely ignore the fact that in First Peter, Peter says, you have been called to suffer. as as,
Mhm.
as Christians, that's actually part of our calling. Our calling is not to be rich and wealthy all the time and comfortable. We actually have a calling as Christians to suffer, but we're called to that because suffering actually grows you up. And
Mhm.
I say this, and I say this as a pastor, and people roll their eyes and they wonder how I can even say this, but it is my experience that suffering will mature a person faster than 5 years of Bible studies will mature a person. Do you have any thoughts on that, Josh?
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I think not only do people have a tendency to ignore suffering, I think when it's finally brought up, they have a tendency to hyperfixate. And then you get the strange argument that people have that, maybe it would be better if we weren't born because suffering is so bad. And so you go from not seeing it to that's all you see. And there's nothing in between. And you don't see the function or form of the thing. And again, it's mostly because there's a lack of point of reference, right? How are you supposed to see? There's no point of reference. You don't know what it's doing, right? And so oftentimes it's the same as when you're a kid and the adult is like, I need to take the band-aid off, we need to clean it, the band-aid has to come off. You're like, no, it's going to rip. I'm not doing that, bro. If you leave a band-aid on for too long, it'll be way worse. But you don't
Mm,
know that. You just
mhm.
see the immediacy of pain, and that's it. You just see the immediacy of pain, right? Or and let's say to a lesser degree of suffering or pain, we're so exaggerative that our children are mournful and sad and even like, "Ah," if they are told they can't have a screen and they're not entertained right now.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, it was the spells of boredom that taught you how to be creative, entertained. If you When I was a kid, there was a saying, if you're bored, it's because you're boring, right? That's actually something very vastly useful to know. That if you're
Mhm.
bored, it's probably because you're boring. Dry spells of boredom are actually what created most of the creativity and expression of creativity that we've ever seen. And it's out of boredom and necessity that most inventions came, right? Like
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure, yeah.
it was lack and difficulty that taught us how to make electricity work for us to heat our homes. That's what it was. It was the death and mangling of people and vehicles that taught us to put safety features in our vehicles,
Mhm.
right? It was the failed botched surgeries over hundreds of years that taught us that sanitation matters. right? We needed to learn those things, and it took a lot of time to learn them, right? I think there's a lot that goes into recognizing that pain has that purpose, right? What most people think is that all pain is needless, gratuitous pain,
Mhm.
right? It's just pain for pain's sake. And that's not true. Most of the time, pain is never for pain's sake, right? That's like masochism, really. But even that's for pleasure's sake. And so we have this really strange imaginary thing that's going on, but it's like it's this faceless anxiety about what pain is. We don't know. We just don't know. And
Mhm.
it's frightening not to know. We're so uncomfortable with not knowing, you know. But the suffering that we experience, and like say even before the suffering, the temptations that we experience are in fact moments of transformation. You as a pastor know very well that when your congregation is aware of their temptations, they're all more likely to know that they're sinning, and B, capable of avoiding it way easier if they know
Oh,
their
yeah.
temptations and they know their tendencies. If you know who you are and what you are and what your tendency is, and you can pay attention to yourself, watch yourself like you would a suspicious stranger, and then know yourself. And you'll see that in those moments of temptation, you haven't sinned yet. You know that you're about to. And that's when you get to learn how to say no. And that's the transformation process. That's part of how sanctification works on the ground floor. That's you
Mhm.
participating in the guidance of the Spirit, is when He's illuminating to you, hey, this is your way of escape. As scripture says, He'll offer you a way of escape. There will be no temptation such that you had no choice. He will offer you
Yeah.
a means of escape. And those moments are the transformation. And saying no to sin sometimes is painful and full of suffering.
Yeah, and I think part of these zombie stories that is so I think one of the things we find so appealing is that there is this intrinsic need for survival built into these stories. And we find people like in the stories, the main characters, for the most part, they don't decide to just give up, but it doesn't matter how many thousands or like in some cases millions of zombies are coming at them. They have this intrinsic need to at least try to survive. And
Mhm.
I think there's something about that in these stories that is trying to communicate to us that because like who wouldn't just put the gun to their head and just end their life because they're living in this apocalypse and it's horrible. Every day is worse than the last day. And yet what I think attracts us to these stories is these people, they refuse to give up. They have to get to the city to get to the cure, or they have to save Susie from from the humans that are going to feed them to the zombies later, right? Like there's this intrinsic need to adapt and to survive that I think allures us and draws us into these stories.
It is. It's because we liked it. And again, this goes back to one of the first things I said. When we find something good, we want to imitate and emulate it. And so we can see in that the bare bones of something heroic. And even if we can't really put our finger on what it is, survival itself is very hard as nails. And somebody who is hard as nails and can stand against the tide, the strongest tree on an island is the one that sees the harshest storm and weathers it. That's the
Mhm.
strongest tree. That's the one you use to
Yeah.
build your raft when you need to escape. You need that tree. And so that's the leader, that's the hero, that's the pillar at the center of the earth. That's what people need. They do need that. And that's good leadership, really, right? Again, as a pastor, I'm sure you're well aware of how that landscape works. People expect solidarity. They expect you to be a cliff that their waves can just bash off of unworn. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
that's something that you have to, in some sense, be able to offer as a father, as a husband, right? As a friend, some degree. Some of these things are going to be there. And so you do see. And sometimes, let's say I have my own anxieties and my life is full of turmoil. And yet I lend my ear, my time, my compassion, my attention, my resources to others because I see their plight also. And together, we can do what the zombies do, but we have plan, we have purpose, we have meaning, we have intention. Those are superpowers comparatively. That's why they can build super fortresses. That's why they can make military weapons of good use. That's why they can harness the power of fire. That's why they can, you know what I mean? Like the humans and the survivors have something. They have something. It's not nothing, but it is always portrayed as not enough. Right? And so you have to know you by yourself, you don't have enough. You want to aim high, it's a communal endeavor, always. It's always going to be you and the community together. Once you're isolated, you're at your weakest. That's one of the lessons that we can learn from this very easily and off top. Her weakness was not that she was, alive and they were dead. It was that she was exposed. She was on the outside. She was alone. She was unarmed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She had nothing, right? And so what happens to the person who doesn't know the gospel? They're unregenerate. They have no fruit of the spirit, and they're not wearing the armor of God. They're running for their life, or they're getting eaten alive. It's exactly what's happening.
The getting eaten alive. Yeah. Okay. No, and that's a perfect segue, Josh. I'm really glad that you said that. So this is a perfect segue because pardon me. So you are the narrative guy. And so from a narrative perspective, Josh, what does the zombie symbolize? And so like and we think of all of these things that are intrinsic to zombies, like they're undead. Which means they can't die. They're just going to continue going and going until everything is consumed. And even if they want to end it all, they can't. They have to continue going. So they're undead. Often they specifically are craving brains. That's the part of the human they want to get to, is the brains. Things like yeah, and so I guess, and we could go on and on talking about what a zombie does, what a zombie is. So from a narrative perspective, what does the zombie symbolize?
Well, it's interesting that you said okay, so narratively speaking, the way that this works, and this is from somebody who's obsessed with this is a backdrop in how you can kind of see how symbolism behaves, almost like a language. What a thing does is congruous with what it is and its meaning, right? And so a zombie consumes, but so does a husband and wife. Consummation is what you do on the first night that you're married, right?
Mm-hmm.
The symbolism of eating is very profound. It's all throughout scripture. But what zombies are is the symbolism of eating devoid of what is sacred. Right? And so that's what it is a zombie is the purely profane life. It is hedonism. It is self-seeking without a self. So imagine when Christ says deny thyself, he doesn't mean deny that you are a self. So he's saying the opposite. Christ is trying to give the volition back. He's saying, you who are without sin, cast the first stone. Now your attention is not turned outward toward where the mob and the peer pressure is pointed. Your attention is now based inward so you can make an assessment. It's decision time. It's no longer reaction time. It is response time. Takes longer, slows things down. There's a process, right? And when you short circuit the process and you go immediately from passion and feeling straight to action, error is almost always what happens. And it doesn't matter what emotion it is. You can be under the influence of rage as much as you can from glee and do stupid things either way. Right? And so what a zombie is irresponsible impulsivity, hedonism, narcissism, because it can't see evil even in the mirror.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
And so and this is one of the reasons, sidebar, it's why vampires don't have reflections, I believe. They're narcissists. They can't see evil in the mirror. And so there's something that they're missing. And what they're missing is the ability to hone in on self and master one's own passions. And so The zombie is what the Calvinist thinks the natural self is, let's say, right? Not to be
Total
theologically
depravity?
divisive, right? Yeah, total depravity. Something like the inborn inability to harness, desire, or enact any good. It is simply self-service for the sake of self-service without actually love of self. So imagine it's self-serving to a self that hates oneself. And that is the worship of death. It is the disillusion of all that is good. It's the breakdown of order into unknown chaos. It is the flood that destroyed the earth, right? That's what it is. And so it's a signifier of a, let's say, negative chaos. Symbolically speaking, it's a negative chaos. What I mean by that is positive chaos, if anybody's wondering what the heck I'm talking about. Symbolism is not a one for one. That's not how it works, right? It's not
Mhm.
this equals this. It's a landscape and a language that connotes something much bigger. And they often work in dualities, pairs of opposites, but not mutually exclusive opposites. Okay. So, as an illustration, just for the symbolic landscape idea, you can have a king and a rebel. In a righteous kingdom, the rebel is a villain. In a tyranny, the rebel is a hero and the king is a villain. So, understand that these symbols of rebel and king, they're symbolic representations of order and chaos. You understand? And so you
Mhm.
have the rebel who is chaos and you have the king who is order. When you get to their excesses is when you have the symbols overlapping one another. You see what I'm saying? And so when the zombie becomes an excess of chaos, it's the decomposition, right? And so
Mhm.
there's no
Yeah.
operative guiding principle, which is what spirits really are. They're operative guiding principles. Some of them are conscious. You are conscious and you're the operative guiding principle for your vessel. You take that away, and what happens? You decompose, you're dead.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the operative spirit is gone. It's an unspirited body, it's an agent of chaos. And because it's together, it's a flood, it's the overwhelming chaos. And so, that narratively and symbolically speaking, that's what it is. It's the excess of chaos, which is the same thing as a flood, right? And so even let's say Halo called the zombies the flood. It's very apt, right? They nailed it
Yeah.
on that one. They nailed it. And what happens? The guy dies, the little popcorn guy jumps on him, revives him. He's now an agent of the thing that just took over the vessel, right? And so in that case, it's just an alien creature. It's hardly sentient, right?
Mhm.
But it has a
Mhm.
drive. It's got a hive mind back somewhere. So it's a spiritual
Mhm.
principle back to that piggybacking of like a transpersonal consciousness, a distributed consciousness that influences and controls, and people willfully and even sometimes unwillfully or subconsciously participate in the will of that guiding principle. And so all of this comes back down, narratively speaking, to um, that agent of chaos, right? And so if chaos is now in the theological landscape, chaos is personified by
Mhm.
dark spirits and sometimes just by Satan himself, right? And so if somebody participates in the will of Satan, what are they doing? Plainly, it's sin, right? So it's like that's kind of in the ultimate sense what it is. It's outsourcing that volition and the decision making process. It's going along with the flood and becoming part of the flood, participating in that which consumes the world.
Yeah. So what do you think about this, Josh? I've noticed that in these stories, there are typically 2 types of zombies. There is one type of zombie is generated by science, like usually, I think you mentioned I Am Legend. In that movie, Will Smith is trying to create a cure for cancer, and he ends up creating this zombie apocalypse. So it starts out at a good place, but trying to play God, we end up creating a devil in our own image type of idea. Whereas
Mhm,
on the other hand, in other zombie stories, instead of zombies being a result of science, there is a supernatural zombie where like witches will get together and they will do necromancy. And so there's a supernatural zombie and there is a natural zombie.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on these? Like, is it a coincidence that we have these two types of zombies, or is there something deeper than that?
No, actually, I don't think there are actually two types of zombies either.
Okay.
Because again, the spirited zombie, which is the overtaken necromanced corpse,
Mm-hmm.
is something that was done by the ciencia that was condemned, witchcraft. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we did was transfer that into the natural sciences, and we
Mm-hmm.
transferred our ciencia, which is knowledge, from forbidden occultish knowledge to a mechanistic, repeatable, experimental, contrived experiences we call experiments, because what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing is creating an environment in which you can recreate something by following the formula somebody else laid out. That's how they thought witchcraft worked, to be honest with you.
Oh, so you're
You
saying
needed the
both
mediation.
are witchcraft.
They're the same thing symbolically.
Okay.
Philosophically, no, because
Right.
it's just not the same thing. You're
Yeah.
talking about naturalism versus supernaturalism. Those are two categories distinctly that we've created, I think, almost artificially, really. But
Mhm.
like technically speaking, symbolically, there's no distinction between the white lab coat priesthood and the coven of witches, right? The garb is different, perhaps the instruments might be different, the intent might be different. The desire for power and to manipulate reality as we see fit, to cut up the dead thing and create something else with it, is
Mhm.
exactly what we want to do, right? Let's say cults do the same thing to scripture. They dissect scripture, they take from it what they want, and they build something else out of it, right? And so what we did was start to treat nature like a dead thing that could be worked and remade how we saw fit, right? But that didn't start with our understanding of nature through the sciences that we have now. It started long before then. We were just really bad at it. And now we've gotten very
Mhm.
proficient at it. You see what I'm saying? And so,
Right.
technically speaking, the two have a great overlap.
That's really interesting. I never thought of it that way, but in essence, it really is the same thing. And in some of these zombie stories, they actually say things like we were trying to play God.
Mhm.
And yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. So what does the is the craving for brains, what is that trying to communicate to our culture through these stories?
More reductionism. You are your body. And if you're conscious, you're up here. You're trapped in here.
Mm,
You're trapped in here. You're a viewer trapped in a body. You're a haunted hotel, right? But the ghost is gone. And so all there is the mechanism. And if you are your brain, because you are not you're not a spirited body, you're just a body. So the locale
mhm,
of consciousness is the brain. The brain happens to be distributed through your body, through your nervous system, but really the locale, the concentrated focal point of your consciousness is your brain to the materialist.
mhm.
That's all you are. You're the brain. So much so that we think that if we took our brain out and put it in another body, you still got the same person, different body. What personhood?
Right.
There's
Yeah.
no personhood.
Mhm,
You're playing fast and loose. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Like there's no person really. There's just the brain. And so a
Right.
zombie lacks personhood. Synthetically, it doesn't have it, but neither do you. What's the closest thing it can approximate? It wants your brains because that's what it
Mhm,
lacks. It wants what you have. You know
mhm,
what I mean? That's the unanswerable desire. And once it gets it from you, you're like it. It's not getting like you. It was not the solution. It doesn't scratch the itch, right? It's like the bully. I'm hurt. And so I hurt you. It didn't scratch the itch, but I can't stop now because it's how I feed myself.
mhm. Yeah, a really interesting thing that always kind of hits me when it comes to zombies is, and it kind of played out in that clip that we watched, because the zombies, they keep coming at her, and the one, it wants her so badly that when it puts its hands on the fence, it pushes so hard, you can see the steel like starting to cut through its hand, but it's still trying to go at her, and it's not really slowing it down much.
Mm-hmm.
But then when she gets through and she's struggling with it, and then you have the hero character comes in, puts the gun to its head, shoots it, and it dies instantly. It
Mm-hmm.
always seems to come back to the brain for some
Mm-hmm.
reason. Like the way you kill a zombie is you get the brain, because
Mm-hmm.
if you cut off an arm or a leg, it'll keep coming at you. It doesn't kill it that way, but it
Well, it's
always
like
has
a
to do
computer.
with the head.
You're looking at look at it like a computer, because remember, it's a materialist monster, right?
Mm,
So it's not a
mhm.
soul that you're operating to try to kill. You're trying to kill the central operating system. And
Right.
so the nervous system, your brain, again, distributes through your body, through your nervous system. If you kill the central operative piece of your nervous system, the nervous system has nothing to operate with. It's null and void, right? The
Mhm.
irony in that is actually the show you just showed, half the brain or plus more is missing. So it's really almost like a violation of lore to be like a brainless zombie that you shoot in the brain that dies because you shot it in the brain it didn't have. Like, it's kind of a weird
R right.
non-feature.
A
But
brainless
there,
zombie that you kill by killing the brain, but
yeah,
it's
you're not supposed
brainless.
to think about
Yeah,
that though. You're not supposed to. You're like, it's
right.
irrelevant, right?
Yeah,
You're not supposed to notice that. It's not supposed to
right.
become relevant because everything else that's paced is supposed to keep you distracted from that. Those
Mhm,
incoherences kind of, they naturally like scatter themselves in narrative, and most of the time you just don't care.
mhm,
You don't ask the question. You don't need to know why. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. But if you ask the question, you can find it's like it's plainly nonsensical, right? But it
mhm,
doesn't matter in the moment. It's even more terrifying that all of the thing that the brains are just, it's all exposed. You know what I mean? And so it's like, and this is a thing that's actually really terrifying is we like the surface of things because depth is terrifying.
right.
And the surface of things, like the surface of a planet, a beautiful face, a beautiful sunset. If you peer behind it, you can play the reductionist game. A sunset is beautiful. It's entrancing. It's enchanted. It's theologically sound. You want to worship God if you know he's behind it. But if you
Mhm,
don't believe he's behind it, you can play the reductionistic game and say it's just the atmospheric tension and the direction of rays and whatever other light structures and so forth. And your eyes and your retina and colors don't exist except in here because your optic nerve translates them and yada yada. It's just this. And then you devoid it of meaning. You've killed the spirit, and all you have left is the body. You've
right.
made a zombie of a sunset. It's horrendous. Don't do that,
Mm,
right? You void the whole thing, and beauty dies with it. And so with it goes truth and goodness. They die with it. And so you have a truthless, hideous, dead, unsold thing. That's what the whole world is made of if you're ready to play that game. Because the nihilism can just kind of go all the way to the body,
mm,
all the way down to the bottom, to the atom.
yeah,
Nothing matters. Nothing has value. It's all just a sea of atomic nonsense. That's it. You just happen to be the arrangement of matter that you are right now. And in 100 years, all that matter will be busy doing other things and you won't matter anymore because all you were is matter. Right. It's like, that's
right.
terrifying. That is a horror story for the ages. The
Mhm,
ancients no, no.
uh-huh. So, I guess, like, what you're saying, Josh, is the idea that you are, because you had mentioned what you're fighting is basically the operating system, because there's no human there, even though you have the human body. And that is kind of just as much horror as the zombie trying to kill you. Is
Mhm.
that kind of what you're getting at here? Like, that is just as dark and evil as the zombie itself.
Yeah. Yes, it's the same premise that taught people in the 60s and 70s to liken humanity unto a virus on the planet.
Mm,
And the Matrix played really heavily with this. You're a
right,
virus, right? Agent Smith,
right.
this
Yeah,
disdaining AI, he's soulless and becomes a zombie horde at the end,
mhm,
but he's got some intent. There's something in there. He wants to know, but he can't. He's got no experience. There's nothing human in him.
mhm.
So then he takes over a human body in that movie, if you remember. Takes over
Yeah,
what's his
he
name?
does.
Cypher's body, right?
Mhm.
What does he do but consume and kill? It's exactly what he does. He has
Mhm.
no point of record. He can't scratch the itch. It's insatiable. It's nothing but desire, unanswerable, just filth of desire, right? And there's nothing behind it except the the face that can't be one. You know what I mean? And so you get
Mhm.
beyond the appearance for Agent Smith, and what do you have? Ones and zeros. There's nothing beyond the surface, right? So everything has a surface, but not every surface has a great depth to it, right? And
Right.
so you meet people that are like this. They're like there's hardly anything to them, right? I think that person is so hard to engage with. And when you get
Mhm.
on the inside, it's like, what's in there? It's darkness, you know? And then you meet somebody that like you see the appearance of them. Let's say you meet a woman, all the single guys, you're gonna meet a lady, hopefully, that you find
Mhm.
attractive. You find her attractive. And everything that's on the surface of what she wants to present to you is meant to be attractive. And you begin to fall for it. Not because she's tricking you or trying to dupe you. Hopefully, she's authentic, but she might not be. And when you get past the surface, when you have the fear of getting past the surface, you treat her like Tinkerbell. She's just potential, and you want her to stay that way. I don't want her to be replaced by the actual woman she is. I'll just love what I think that she is, and I'll treat her like she's this perfect thing. I'll put her on a pedestal, and then I'll get abused. How about that? We do
Mhm.
this to ourselves all the time with lots of things. You know what I mean? So it's like you can see that when you begin to treat something that is good like it's a god, it quickly becomes a devil because you don't know what's behind the surface of it. You know? And so we we don't see what's behind things. We only see the appearance of things. And then it surprises us when we finally get to see the inside of something. You know, like you look at the planet, it's beautiful, the light touches everything, it's amazing. Go inside a cave. Oh, it's terrifying. It's dark, it stinks.
Yeah.
It's dangerous because you've gone past the just the mere appearance down into the inside of the thing and you found out you didn't like it. Most things in life end up being that way. You know what I mean? Like they're very terrifying. And so like if you devoid the world of meaning and then all you have is the appearance of things and when you get past it what you find is darkness and stink and danger, you either live superficially or you hate everything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's definitely I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. So, I guess what we would call, idea or another concept that typically is embedded in a lot of these zombie movies, a lot of these zombie video games, a lot of these stories. There's usually one scene where the people are talking and as bad as all the zombies are and as horrible as they are, there's usually this scene where somebody gets betrayed by a human that is not a zombie.
Mhm.
And there's usually this dialogue about how the the real danger in these zombie apocalypses is not the zombies, because you can always trust a zombie to be a zombie.
Mhm.
He's always going to come at you, and you can even kind of if you live long enough, you can figure out their patterns, their migration, and so everything they do, they're gonna keep doing, and you can
Mhm.
trust the zombie to always be the zombie. But the humans, though, you can never tell who's really your friend and who will betray you at the drop of a hat. Can we talk about
Mhm.
that for a second?
Sure. Yeah. If you remember about a year, maybe a year and a half ago, it might have been a while. Seems like it was a while ago, but time is weird. If you remember, there was an internet fad going around where women were asking each other if they'd rather be lost in the woods with a bear or a man, and they played with this exact moral quandary. A bear is just a bear, but a man can be very evil. Bears
Mhm,
can't be evil; they can only be hungry, defensive. That's about all you got. They can be
mhm,
territorial or they can be hungry. Men can be territorial and hungry and a swath of other things.
mhm.
They can be conniving. They can be clever. They can be manipulative. They can be attractive. They can be abusive. They can be entrancing. They can be powerful. You see what I mean? They can be subduing. They can do it's there's all kinds of things that go along with that. But yeah, it's the same question that they posed. And this, to their credit, there's not a lot of things that I like about Disney anymore. But when they were making good movies, they made one called The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And the central question of that story was, who
Oh,
is the monster and who is the man?
thank you.
And the confusion lied in exactly that. Quasimodo, which literally means half formed, partially formed. He's a monster. Physically, he's a monster. It's the Beauty and the Beast question. Beast
Mhm.
is a monster. However, in Quasimodo's story, it's Master Frollo, the guy who's actually working in accordance with the church and the bishopry and everything else. He's a man of authority. He's a monster, not
He's
on
the
the
real
presentation.
monster, yeah.
He's the real monster. The one who looks like a monster wasn't a monster. The one who looked like a man was the real monster. You can go to Beauty and the Beast. You have Beast, who looks like a monster. When you first meet him, he kind of even seems a little bit like a monster, but you kind of are confused by his gracious, like, hostility, if you could call it that. But then you
Mhm,
find out at the end, the real monster was Gaston, right?
mhm.
Like, he's the real monster, but he looks like the man. And so this moral quandary has been around for a long time, right? Man can be monstrous. We can, right? And technically, the hero and the villain are rather equally monstrous most of the time, which is why you need the hero to face the villain. He's the only one capable, right? And so a lot of the time, what it takes is, especially if the people are hapless at the bottom and there's an overwhelming force, you need a monster to trade sides in order to win. That's really what you need. You need a monster to defeat the monsters,
Mhm.
right? And so, what are monsters afraid of? Like, that's kind of what you would need in order to capture, right? And so when you look at the thing that makes a monster who's also a villain, a lot of the time what happens is they didn't begin as a monster, they became one through circumstance and decision, right? And when you look at a hero, oftentimes they don't start out as a powerful fortitude and honor and valor. They start as nothing, and through circumstance and decision become something formidable and honorable and full of valor. If you look at there's something strange that happens here. The story of the villain arc, where something awful happens and it creates the monster. Hero arcs, something awful happens and creates a hero. Why is it the hero
Mm,
and the villain have the same backstory, but not the same presence?
right.
Right? There's really where the question is. It's not whether man can be a monster. They should be. If somebody came in my house and threatened my wife or my kids, you better believe somebody would meet the monster that lives in here. But he only comes out for predators. Sheep don't eat other sheep. Amen.
Oh
And
my goodness,
sheep
so
don't
that is
eat other sheep.
such I heard that quote for the first time this week, and it was in one of your videos, actually. I was watching some of your live streams that you've done on the Cosmic Corner, and that is such a good quote. The difference between a sheep and a wolf is sheep don't eat sheep.
Mhm.
And there's so much truth packed into that, Josh.
That's right. But the thing is we need, especially as a shepherd, that you need to be able to have teeth, but you don't pull them out on the flock. You pull them out on the predator,
Mhm.
right? And so you're expected. You need to be a monster, but it needs to be on a leash. You see what I mean? And so there needs to be something that is of guidance, a spirited, virtuous principle actively guiding the thing. And so it needs to be spirited, but it needs to be a proper, godly, righteous spirit behind that animality, right? And so it all comes back to that. When you kill off the ghost, what do you have? That's really where this all comes back to. When you
Mhm.
kill off the good, what do you have? You have the suffering of life, you have the difficulty of the future, you have the indeterminacy of everything that's coming towards you, and you have your own little helplessness. What does
Mhm.
that build for you? That strange trap of self-victimization is going to build something out of you that should not be. You know what I mean? Those are things
Mhm.
that can be a self-made trap because we lack hope and we lack perspective. This is one of the best things about apologetics. It's not about having an answer for why you're right. It's about having an answer for why you have hope. You can see the future for what it is. You have hope.
Mhm.
Nobody else has that. You know what I mean? Like that's that's something that is the absolute centerpiece hold that drives exactly what it is, why we want the survivor to live, why we want them to get away. They represent that thing that we're reaching for so badly. We need the hope. That's the cure. Hope is the cure for soullessness.
Mhm. All right, well, you brought up The Cure, so let's talk about The Cure. In these stories, there is often a cure arc in the story
Yes.
where they sometimes, like, I think in The Walking Dead, they went, like, 4 or 5 seasons of just hopelessness. Like, we're just trying to survive out here, and then in,
Mhm.
like, I think it's season 5, they introduce there's a possible cure, and we have to get to, I think it's Washington or something, where the cure never made it out of the lab or something like that. And they also do this in I Am Legend, where
Mhm.
he does eventually develop a cure, depending on which alternate ending of the movie that you go with.
Mhm.
Because in one ending, he does cure a zombie, and the zombie becomes human again. And so there's this idea that maybe the zombie does have its soul still, but it's unable to attach itself to it. So
That was
maybe
the
can we
other thing
can
that I
we
had
talk about
mentioned
that for a
earlier.
bit?
Yeah, that was the thing I'd mentioned earlier as the additional terror that's rarely ever explored with this story is the
Mhm,
idea that the person is actually still in there.
mhm,
They just have no control. They're just watching a terrifying, unending movie of their own demise, right? That's especially heinous and terrifying, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
that's not necessarily part of the cure that you were asking about. So it's like it's kind of a tangent. But just to be frank, I think that's actually almost more terrifying than being ripped limb to limb and then ending. Is
Mhm,
that you get ripped limb to limb and then you never cease to be conscious. Your body ceases to be conscious. You know what I mean? Like that
mhm.
is particularly terrifying. It's a lot more analogous to the Hollywood portrayal of something like Possession, right? Where the person may or may not even be in there. And what's speaking is not the person, right? Um,
Mhm.
my favorite fiction novels are the Ransom or Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. I don't know if you've
Oh,
read
yeah.
those. Yeah, they're fantastic. And in the second and the third books, Lewis plays with the idea that a human consciousness might be overwhelmed and hijacked by a dark spirit if it opens itself to such a thing.
Mhm.
If it invites the vampire past the threshold, the hypnosis can really take hold, right? And so that's kind of a really dense picture that's in there also, but it is, like I said, a little bit of a tangent, right? But as far as the cure thing, one of the thing that's really interesting is sometimes you need the magic, you need the science, you need a lab to cook up a cure because the lab caused the problem. The ring can only be destroyed in the Mount Doom where it was forged. That is all.
Right.
You can't do anything else. You need the source to kill the thing, right? And
Mhm.
so, um, you know, if the ring needs to be destroyed in the volcano, the only person that knows how to get there is the one person that doesn't want the ring destroyed. Gollum is the guide. So counterintuitive. But
Mhm.
Gollum is also what Frodo could become. So he needs that. He can't see where he's going. He doesn't know how to get through darkness. He
Yeah.
needs something that's really dark to do it. Right. And so that it's kind of like Gollum is the problem and the cure. Gollum is the reason the ring died, actually, right? If it
Yes.
wasn't
Yes.
Gollum's pride and self-hatred being consumed by the ring first, the ring
Mhm.
wouldn't have been destroyed because Frodo was about to walk away with it. He's about to betray Sam and walk
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and
We,
okay,
we forget about that part a lot.
this will get real nerdy, Josh, but you brought up Lord of the Rings, so this is really your fault. So in the books, it's even more evident because in
Mhm.
the books, Frodo does not struggle with Gollum. Gollum bites his finger off, takes the ring, and in his enjoyment of jumping up and down, he trips and he falls off and he destroys the ring himself
Right.
without the struggle of him and Frodo. So it's out of his own need to consume, that his need to have the ring is what kills him and destroys the ring simultaneously.
Right. And so it's not Frodo that enacts justice, even accidentally. It's actually the
Right.
hidden hand of Eru that ends the thing, right? It's
Yeah, well, and that's
seemingly chance.
that's part of the brilliance of Lord of the Rings is in Lord of the Rings, the way evil tries to win is through its numbers and its armies and its monsters and
Force
just
and
trying to
control.
overwhelm the good. But the
Mhm.
way the good wins is not through armies, and it's not even through the good magic of the wizard, but it is through a series of events like dominoes falling. This happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, it ends. The last domino is Golem destroying the ring out of his own greed. And so
Mhm.
it is out of the sovereignty of Eru Iluvatar, the god of Lord of the Rings. It's just his own sovereignty that just sends down the dominoes, and it just fixes itself is basically what happens.
Exactly. Exactly. And so the one who implements the cure is actually behind the scenes, right? And so
Mhm.
that's one of those
Yeah.
times when if you don't despirit the world, you can see that if you see beyond the appearance into
Mhm.
the depth of the thing, there is righteous good there. There is,
Mhm.
right? And so if you do not devoid the world, you don't play that reductionistic game and you don't despirit reality, you can see God's hand and God's fingerprints on everything, even in your
Mhm.
suffering, even in your difficulty, right?
Mhm.
And so like back to the cure thing, where that ties in really is sometimes it's by way of the need for the thing that was its source, right? Sometimes it's that provident hand. There just happens to be one person who's immune. Now they're the only person that needs to survive. Everybody's willing in heroism to self sacrifice to make sure hope survives. That one
Mhm.
person who is the cure, right? That
Mhm.
immune person, right? And so in let's say in the symbolic biblical landscape, we know very well who the immune person is. There's only been one of them. The
Mhm.
incarnate Christ is the immune one.
Mhm.
And what did Peter say? I'm going to be handed over. Peter's like, over my dead body, Lord. And he
Yeah.
said, your mind is not, it's full of the things of man and not of the things of God. Get behind me, Satan.
Yeah.
Right? Christ knows what has to happen. But man's impulse is, you're the cure. We need you to survive. Nothing else matters. Right? So we have these intuitions and we can see that happening. We know what that is. Right? And so what happens in the scripture that's analogous to this? Where's the touchstone? I think it's when the leper is healed. Christ reaches
Mhm.
out and is willing to touch this man who should be a contamination. No one else can touch him, but Christ is immune. Christ is not
And
only immune, he takes the sickness and destroys it.
and I think to even add emphasis, Christ doesn't need to touch him, because
Correct.
usually the way he heals people is he just speaks and they're healed, but he purposefully, with intention, chooses not to do that and touches them first and then speaks, almost as if he's trying to make a point.
Mhm. Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, it's like the girl that he raises from the dead, Jairus's daughter, right? He's not supposed to touch a corpse. That's unclean.
Right. Mhm.
How close did he get before life came back? We don't really know, right?
Mhm.
Flirting with the line, really. But you can
Yeah.
see that Christ was immune in a way that we are not,
Yeah.
right? Even in accordance with the law, Christ was in some sense immune when we are not, right? The Lord of the Sabbath and so forth. It's very interesting, some of the things that play out there, right? But Christ is the answer. He's immune. And so there's something about him that we need as the cure. And so it's not for him to survive undamaged. In order to unleash the cure, we needed what was in him to come out. And so they scourged him and they beat him and they bled him and they killed him. They buried him. Then he came out. And from that, we received what he gave us, his body and his blood. And unlike zombies, we can eat both, and we're not villainous or mob-like. That is the cure, right? Like Christ offered himself as the cure. How is it that we receive him? The same symbolism. We are the body that consumes the head, but it's done lawfully because it is offered and it is not stolen. We are not molesting Christ's person to get it. He offered it freely. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that lack of parasitism and the taking that never gives back. He offered reciprocity. He offered relationship. He made it personal and participatory. We're in on it. That's the beauty of it. We're in on it. His body and blood is not us being monsters. It's us being saved. That's what it is. That's why the gospel is the power of God unto salvation. That's what it is. It's the answer to death. It's the answer to what death is doing. The dissolution of all good and all meaning. The breakdown of good order. When God in the beginning in Genesis said, it is good. It is good. It is very good. The word for good is not moral perfection there. It would be in appropriation with accordance in God's divine intent and order operating as he saw fit. It is good. It is in accordance with the divine intent. And so sin, operatively, is to be in deviation from divine intent, to disenchant, to fragment, to break apart, to decompose the thing. And so how does sex become sinful? You break it away from its sacred place. You deviate from divine intent and you get it either the wrong way or too much. That's how sex becomes sinful. How does money become sinful? The exact same process.
The same way. Yeah.
How does power become sinful? How does influence become sinful? How does being attractive become sinful? The same problem over and over and over again. It's the same problem.
Yeah. And it is interesting how whenever somebody tries to depict evil on screen, it is always depicted as the inversion or the opposite of Christ every time. Like even we have this idea, like the need of the zombie is to consume, is to eat. And what Jesus does, and I can't remember where I read this, but some theologian pointed out that in the sacrifices, like in pagan sacrifice, and also in the Jewish sacrifices as well, the sacrifice was a meal. Like it was meant either as food for the gods or food for the people. And in the Jewish sacrifice, it was often both. But the sacrifice was a meal. And what Jesus does the night before his sacrifice is he gives the Last Supper and he says, "This is my body and this is my blood." So Christ, our God, is actually the only God that does a reverse sacrifice. Because normally the sacrifice is supposed to be food for the gods. But here God comes down, he becomes human, and he gives his body as a sacrifice for us. And what he says is, eat and drink my like the eat and drink the bread and the wine, because what he's doing a reverse sacrifice. Instead of the human being food for the gods, we have the God. He's giving himself as food for the humans to sustain the humans, which is totally bizarre and upside down.
Exactly. And it's, you know what it is? It's a full expression of self-sacrifice, taking on responsibility, and the expression of real power, the harnessing and expression of real power. We think in our naivety and self-obsession that the expression of power is to get what I want, right? That's not the expression of power, not in any biblical sense. If God wanted to
Correct.
get what he
Mhm,
wanted, he could
mhm.
make it happen. Full stop. He
Yeah,
could make it occur. He spoke the worlds into being, for goodness sake. He could make it happen. There's
yeah.
nothing stopping him except him. So what harnesses that? Why is he bridled? If he's holding the bridle, why is he bridled? Right? Why is it that he does not unleash his naked self on reality? Because in its state, presently, it would be undone. Right? It's the same reason why Moses couldn't see his face and live. You can't. Right? You can't. So we need that. We need that buffering. We need that covering. We need something between him and us as that protection, right? Those garments of skin. Hey, Amber,
Mhm.
we need those things, right? But we need the ones that God provides. We provide for ourselves many false coverings because we're afraid. Our fig leaves because we know we're naked, right? Those things need to be taken. They need to be taken and they need to be replaced. And so oftentimes what we're doing is trying to synthetically achieve something that we ourselves don't know how to do. We don't have the roadmap. We don't understand it. Right. Then the incarnation comes along and gives us a living roadmap and says, follow me. Well, there's your cure. There's your answer. You don't have to make it up as you go. It's not life a la carte, right? You don't have to
Right.
do that. You have a model, you have a pattern to follow, right? Just went through Titus at church. I've been helping to cover for my pastor because he got a really bad back injury last year, and so I've been preaching every other Sunday for a couple of months now. And we just went through the book of Titus, and one of the things that's in there is Paul instructs Titus to be a pattern of good works for the young men in Crete.
Mm,
He
mhm.
says, be the pattern of good works. The word there is actually can be translated as image, but not image in the Old Testament sense. It would be more so like an imprint, a lasting, permanent imprint. The markings in Christ's hand that were left by the scars from the nails left a pattern, an image of that kind. Be a lasting impact pattern. Are you the nail scarred hands for someone's life? Is a really great way of asking that.
Mm,
Are you
mhm.
the evidence that some doubting Thomas needed to see? Is that what you are? He instructed Titus to be that through good works. It's an expression, it's a lived expression. Why do you need a lived expression? Because we're the image of a living God. That's what the expression is meant to connote. You are that thing. That's what you are. You're living to be that thing. So everything that you do that is not in accordance with that is by definition sin, even if you had good intentions behind it. That's actually
Right.
how this works. So it all comes back down not to some finger wagging moralization, but really it comes down to recognizing one's own place, to see that you have a purpose and you have a meaning, but it doesn't require that you make it up as you go. You're not trying to customize reality here, and you're also not trying to become some custom fit thing that reality wants to mold you into. It's not either of those ease things. It's not about the comfort and the ease. It's like you said, it's the hard road. It's the narrow road that Christ describes. It's the mountain of Eden, as we were talking about before, right? It's going back up the mountain, and walking uphill is not easy. It's much easier to walk downhill, isn't it? But
Oh,
we
it's
see where that goes. We see
walk,
where that goes.
fall, roll, yeah, all that
Yeah,
is much easier.
but you can see where that goes. Where do waterfalls end up? Where do rivers empty out into? The
Mhm.
collection of all that is chaos, the ocean, the
Yeah,
waters that consumes everything. It goes in every direction forever and ever. Amen. Right?
yeah.
It's not to
Mhm.
be overcome except by those select few that look it in the face and build something that I'm going to sail right across it. I'm going to go to the other side and find a new thing.
Mhm.
That's the pioneer myth. That's hope. That's the answer. Hope is the cure. Like I said, it's the
Yeah.
thing that makes the future something worth looking at. And the future, by the way, is where you're going. And you should probably look where you're going. You're less likely to stumble, eh?
Yeah.
Right? So, like, this is the thing. We don't look at the future and then we sin. Why? Well, you're not looking where you're going. Duh. You have a bad flashlight and you're looking backwards. No wonder you're falling over everything. Well, life is just in the way. Well, maybe you could have spotted it out if you were looking where you were going. Maybe if you have your eyes heavenward, all these things on the ground floor won't be so bothersome. You won't be so concerned about this or that because you'll be seeking first the kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. But if you're
Mhm.
seeking the all these things, you don't get the kingdom or these things.
Yeah.
You don't get them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So another thing is, like, when we look at the concept of the zombie apocalypse,
Mm,
and we see so much of it is an inversion of what is good. Basically, a zombie is the opposite of a human made in the image of God. That's basically what a zombie is. It is an inverted human to the point of abs to the absolute level, basically.
it's an
And
image of
so
death.
another thing that a zombie apocalypse is an inversion of is actually what, as far as I'm concerned, the central promise of the New Testament, which is the
Resurrection.
resurrection of the dead.
That's exactly it. Yep.
And and something that I've had to point out to some people is that a resurrection is not a zombie.
Mm,
Or in other words, a zombie is not a resurrection. It is an inversion of a resurrection. And so and here's kind of where I get on my soapbox, because for half of my, not even half, 2/3, I was 20 years old the first time I heard a sermon on the resurrection of the dead, because my whole life I thought the gospel was you get to go to heaven when you die as a disembodied spirit, and that's what eternal life is. But when I was 20 years old, the first time I heard a sermon on the promise that we're actually coming back and we're getting new bodies that cannot die, and we will spend the majority of eternity in a new world where death has been removed from, and we will literally live forever on a in a new created heavens and earth. And I'm finding in the evangelical world more and more, we do not have this concept of the central doctrine of the resurrection of the dead. Uh, Josh, maybe can we talk about, like, when the Bible talks about resurrection, what are we talking about?
that I've um that is probably a little beyond my skill in general to articulate very well, but I will say that it is it is best understood by way of analogy or metaphor because we don't have a direct point of reference for something like that. But
Mhm,
scripture says that when he arrives, that we will be like he is. And it says we do not yet know what that means, but
mhm,
we will be like he is, right? And so
mhm,
when Christ resurrected, he had a very unique circumstance because he retained exactly the body that he had prior, and it was not, let's say, it was not made like completely unbroken, free from scars or any other such thing. I
mhm,
don't think that scripture gives any indication that when we are resurrected, that will sustain all of the ill that our body sustained while we were here. Instead, we'll receive a perfected thing that is imperishable and undamaged.
mhm,
Very good, as it would be in Genesis 1, something like that,
mhm,
right? And so Christ retains the scars of our deliverance, but we will obtain something that is like him, which is perfection, restoration, wholeness, right? And Paul says that it would be like planting a seed and receiving something new. What grows out of a seed is not a really tall seed. That's not what happens. And
right.
so if we thought that zombies were resurrections, it would be like thinking that when you planted a seed in the ground, it just got a bigger, bigger, bigger seed. Like that's not what happens. You don't get a sizable seed. The thing breaks open, it ceases to be, something new takes form. It takes root, and the seed is simply gone. If you ever watch germination process, the seed deteriorates so entirely, its shell is gone, its innards are gone. Nothing is left of the seed. It's
Mhm,
gone. It's entirely replaced by something new that was sourced from the seed, but distinct from the seed. Something that you wouldn't have guessed from looking at a seed, right? Look at an acorn. Do you see an oak tree written on it? No,
No,
but
but
give it
there's an oak
seed,
tree
time, and
in the
harvest.
acorn.
Exactly. Give it the
Yeah.
seed and time and harvest that it needs on repetition cycle, the way that time works. If you let that play out, what comes from the acorn is so much greater than the acorn, you would have no point of reference if all you'd ever seen was an acorn.
Mhm.
And so here we are living as acorns, thinking, okay, when I die, I'll come back as like a super acorn. Cool. No, no, you won't. You'll be something so new, so different, so holy, which means divinely unlike, something like that, right? You'll be so different that it won't even be a point of reference for you to be like, oh, it's like that. No, it isn't. It's not
Mhm.
like that. And you don't have a point of reference. So the best thing you have, I think, is analogy and metaphor, spiritual principles that paint a picture for you to understand what you cannot have. You can't look that far beyond the veil yet. There's nothing you can do to see it, right? We simply don't have access until we're granted access. And we have to be made prepared for that, you know? And so that's why I say I don't know that I have a perfect skill to articulate whatever the resurrection will be, but I can say why it's not like a zombie, because you're not like an acorn. And an oak tree is not an acorn. You see what I mean? And so a zombie
Mhm.
is not a resurrection for the same
Mhm.
reason that an acorn that you buried that rotted, if you dug it up and it had like life in it, it wouldn't be a new acorn that grew. It would be something else. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Jesus is not a zombie, and zombies are a profane parody of resurrection. That's
Mhm.
what it is.
Mhm.
Vampires as well, by the way, but for a different reason. Vampires are explicitly an antichrist figure, right? But zombies can see something more like an anti-church. Think of it that way, because
Oh,
they're the
yeah.
congregant body. That's what
Right,
they are.
because they move in community all the time.
Mhm.
There's always a horde of zombies. There's never
And they
just one.
feast together,
Mhm.
don't they?
Right.
They feast together in their unholy saturation. And so
Yeah.
they're the anti-church the same way that the vampire is the antichrist. Both a
Mhm.
parody of resurrection, both of them.
Right. Wow. Okay. We're coming up on 2 hours, and, if I continue, we'll go another
Oh, yeah.
2.
Oh, man.
So I just wanna yeah, we should probably end it here because yeah, I'll continue going.
It's not a bad spot to round off. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so basically what we're talking about here is, Jesus is the cure for zombieism. Je
Mhm.
Jesus is the cure, and, he the really, the way he heals the horde is he transforms and resurrects them, and then what you get is the church when after the resurrection, because you have the instead of being a horde, you are the ecclesia, you are the gathering of God's people, which is, such an amazing idea.
Christ is the impossible figure that stands at the center, who doesn't
Mhm,
move for the tide as it comes. And he can
mhm,
hit the whole structure the way you can't. That whole
right,
structure that overwhelms you into paralyzation and you can't move, Christ dealt with that. That's what he
mhm,
did. He was the immovable object that everything washed past, and he appropriated even the waters,
mhm,
right? It wasn't necessarily that the waters baptized Christ, it's that Christ baptized the waters, right?
right, yeah,
Right? Yeah,
uh-huh,
that's the thing. That's the thing. Humanity didn't consume God in the incarnation. God appropriated humanity into the divine in the incarnation. He is the
right,
cure.
right. Yeah, what was it? Was it Athanasius that said that God became man, that man may become God,
I
which
th-
is a
I
way of which is not saying you get to be the 4th member of the Trinity, right?
Shucks.
What it's what it's saying is we become godly. We participate in the energy of God. We are transformed, and we become like God. We become godly, which is it's a beautiful idea of the incarnation.
Yes, that's right. the image is the gift and the likeness is our calling. That's the other way I've heard it put.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, Josh, I just want to thank you for coming on again and having this incredibly nerdy, theological, awesome conversation with me. I've
Oh
really
yeah.
enjoyed your I've really enjoyed our conversation. I want to thank everybody for watching. Those of you that are watching now and those of you that'll be watching in the future over the next couple days. For more awesome content like this, Josh, why don't you remind everybody where your corner of the internet is and how people can find you on YouTube?
Well, I'm in a couple of places on YouTube. If you want more of what we're discussing here, you can check out Cosmic Corner. If you look up Cosmic Corner in the search tab, my playlist should be the first thing that comes up. But the other way you can find it is just by searching the channels called Faith Unaltered. If you look that up, you go onto our playlist tab. We have lots of content on there, but mine is the Cosmic Corner. And then also, I do have sermons available online. If you look up Calvary Chapel Concord Joshua Davidson, I have a playlist of those sermons as well. And I do a lot of this, but through a verse by verse expository view of Scripture. I'm doing a lot of the same pattern tracing, right? And so, if you like that way of thinking, if you like that way of doing things, if you have ADHD and your brain works like a ping pong with good strings, like check it out. That's kind of what I do. And so there's that. And then, I think it would be really fun. I want to invite you. You want to come on Cosmic Corner? I would love to have this inverse to where I could hear some of your input, not as the interviewer, but as a participant. Because I feel like even though you're listening, and you're a good listener, by the way, I think, and that's one of the reasons why you're a pastor, I'm sure. But as a good
It does
listener,
help, yeah.
as a good listener, you're able to follow and you're able to make relevant distinctions. That means that you have something to offer also, and I want to hear it. So I invite you to come on a Cosmic Corner episode with me.
Oh, I would love that'd be so much fun. I'd be happy to, Josh. So, yeah, so I just want to encourage everybody, go check out Josh's stuff. I s- I I ruined an entire afternoon the other day just listening to all kinds of fun conversations over on the Cosmic Corner there. They do all kinds of fun stuff. They do a vampire episode. Like maybe we should do a vampire episode. That'll be fun. But
That'd be
anyways,
cool.
go check out his stuff. If you want to support this channel, the best thing you can do is like and subscribe. That's basically the best way you can support me on this channel. I don't sell t-shirts or mugs or anything like that. So, but clicks are free. And so if you want to click subscribe or click like on the video, that actually does a huge amount you for the channel. You actually have no idea. So I just want to thank everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.